Well, good afternoon, sports fans. This is my RSSI ProTrack antenna that I've been using to fly long-range FPV missions for the last couple of months. It's a tracking antenna, but unfortunately it does have a little bit of trouble tracking once my Teximo gets out beyond about 4 kilometres. Prior to this, I was using a quantum Overlord diversity antenna array, which on the surface looks like it provides 360-degree coverage, which is what I thought I needed for the long range stuff. But when you look a little bit more closely at it, you realise that the high gain patch antennas it uses just don't have a not wide enough beam to cover the full 360 degrees. So what happens is that once you get out past 3 or 4 kilometres, you need to keep constantly adjusting the angle of the antennas to try and capture the signal. I ended up modifying the array so that 3 of the antennas actually provide overlapping coverage, which gives me a much wider beam, but only in a single direction. This makes it easier to fly within the beam once you find the plane, but obviously it cuts down on the coverage from the sides, which isn't really an issue for me as I generally fly out and back in the same line. A few people have been asking me which is the best antenna, so I've decided to do a simultaneous side-by-side comparison test to check it out. I'll be using my old faithful Teximo for the test, and I'll just be doing circuits out to about 1 kilometre just to compare the coverage of the 2 antennas. Okay for a hand launch? So it's a lovely sunny day, but there's a fair bit of wind coming from the north, which is one of the reasons why I'm not attempting anything out too far today. I've set the base station up with the overlapping antennas of the Overlord facing almost due west, which is straight out in front of me. And I won't be moving the orientation of it for the duration of the test. The ProTrack, of course, will be tracking the plane, and I don't expect it to have any difficulty at all. Each antenna is feeding its signal through its own individual DVR. And as you can see, they're displayed individually on the screen with the footage from the Mobius camera in the background. So the on-screen display shows speed and altitude telemetry from the model, but also has a useful display in the middle of the screen, which is like a sort of pseudo radar, which shows the location and direction of flight of the model in relation to home in the middle. I've set home at about 50 metres due west of me. This is about 5 minutes into the flight. I had a bit of a problem with some of the cables that I had to swap out, but everything's hunky-dory from here in. You might notice a slight lag in the radar information being displayed on the screen where the plane might not be pointing in exactly the same direction. This is just a little bit of lag from the GPS, and it's only minor and really doesn't generally bother me at all. So at this point I'm heading east and setting up for a low pass past the base station. I'm losing altitude and turning to the north, which will bring me straight into the blind spot of my modified Overlord, and you can see some glitching, which I expected. There's also a couple of glitches on the ProTrack, which probably indicates that I'm flying below the vertical angle of the antennas that I set, so there may be some of that in the Overlord as well, who knows. Either way, it's only minor and really isn't a problem at all. So I'm heading out a bit further on this run, so almost due west, which is pretty well straight out in front of the base station, so the right in the middle of the Overlord array. So I take it out to just about a kilometre or just over a kilometre, and there are no real problems at all, a couple of glitches on the Overlord. Then I turn south, which takes me right across the face of the Overlord antenna. I didn't expect this to pose any challenges for the ProTrack, but I thought the Overlord might have shown a little bit of glitching, but it handled it without a problem at all. So once again I'm approaching the southern side of the base station and decide to have a bit of a muck around to see if the blind spot in my modified Overlord is going to be a problem. And there are a couple of glitches, but it's really a lot better than I thought it was going to be. The ProTrack, of course, isn't having any problems at all. It's locked on pretty solid to the Texumo and is behaving as I expected it to. So I start to come down for another low pass and do start getting a little bit of break-up from the Overlord. Just a couple of glitches on the ProTrack, but I suspect, as I said, it's probably more to do with the vertical angle of the antennas and my nod on the Overlord. So on this pass from the south I'm coming in a bit higher, and that seems to confirm my view about the angle of the antennas. I don't seem to have as much glitching on either of the antennas. At this point I'm thinking about a landing, but I came in from too high and I've let the plane get too slow, and I just decided to abort and go around. So there you go. From my perspective, I would hate to try and pick a winner out of the two antennas at this range. I think they're both pretty good. There's very minimal glitching going on. The ProTrack gave me no trouble at all. It kept a solid lock on the Texumo, and I wasn't really expecting any problems with it at this range. I must admit to being a little surprised at the performance of the Overlord though. I thought the modifications I'd made would really limit the 360-degree coverage, but apart from a little bit of glitching to the south, they don't seem to have had a huge impact, certainly not at this range. So I'll be doing a couple more of the side-by-side comparison tests at increasingly greater ranges, just to see if there's some point at which one of them outperforms the other. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see.